Good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is our second advocacy training of the evening and kind of general update as we prepare for the upcoming 2026 state legislative sessions. We do this on an annual basis, kind of covering different regions and some of the trends that we're seeing. Um, I'm Joshua Habursky, the Chief Executive Officer of the Premium Cigar Association. Glenn Loop is our Director of State Advocacy, and Ricardo Carioni is our Director of Education and International Affairs. So we have a few folks from the team on here. This session will be recorded and sent out to folks that are not able to join. I'm going to go over just a few basics and then turn it over to Glenn. And then we will stop our recording after we give the general presentation so that you can freely ask questions of us. So, obviously the federal government is shut down currently, so not a lot of activity going on there. We've had a number of meetings really starting last month, general education with some of the newer members of Congress. We did a congressional fly-in with the women of PCA where we had over 85 meetings. I'm personally batting kind of cleanup on some of the meetings that we may have missed during that time. We try to have typically at least 100, if not 200, federal congressional meetings every year, just to, ward off any tax increases. Senator Durbin and Representative Christian Morthy traditionally introduce what's called the Mama's Act, which actually takes the price of all tobacco taxes, puts it at the same line as cigarettes, and doubles that tax. So very harmful for the industry. In all of our meetings, we make sure to put a finer point to that, as well as just educating members on the basics of premium cigars. Um, I recently also went to the White House to meet with the National Economic Council, discussing a variety of different topics, one of which was tariffs. Obviously, we are concerned with the fluctuation of tariffs. I think stability, at least from the retail perspective, would be welcomed in that. We are also encouraging for the reduction in the case of Nicaragua from 18% to 10%, or the elimination of all tariffs on premium cigars because the market demands in the retail sector are what really drives this portion of the sector in the United States. We cannot grow enough premium cigar tobacco to meet the 500 million imports of cigars in the United States annually. The other piece that we've kind of pushed forth is if there are a component of tobacco that uses United States made tobacco, i.e., Pennsylvania broadleaf, Connecticut shade, Florida sun-grown, that it would be the totality of the product would be exempted from the tariff pricing. So those are the main issues of the day that we are wading through from the federal basis. But there has been an influx of state activity. So we have shifted our government affairs consultant. We have an outside consultant. They are now almost exclusively working on state activities in support of Glenn. And I am also splitting my time up. I traditionally handle the White House, Congress, and the Food and Drug Administration. But, major issues at the state level, which includes some activity going on in Texas and California, as well as kind of administering the programs of the association that benefits the states. I'm pleased to announce, and you may have seen the release, that we are renewing our state affairs grants. So states are eligible to apply for those grants, or if their state association does not exist, PCA will help supplement the cost of starting a new state association to spur advocacy activity. The other major point, and Glenn will get into it in further detail, but PCA, along with the Cigar Association of America, has funded a study on tax caps. The results of that are we have gotten some initial reports, are very positive, and we tend to use that in a very tough 2026 state legislative cycle where we are expecting an influx of tax increase proposals to be introduced in a variety of state governments. Um, the other thing that we are, actively looking for is, our litigation piece. So I know we have some manufacturers on board this call. We are in kind of the final phase of the defining of premium cigars. That session, there's been some filings, and this is where the industry is split. PCA and CRA have, filed in support of the current definition. The CAA has sought to expand that definition. So, as soon as that is wrapped up, we will make sure that we inform folks on where that stands. But I know that we've gotten a couple of questions from manufacturers recently about predicate dates and things that are in flux. Nothing has changed, in regards to that. If it meets the 8-point definition that Judge Maida used originally, if there is a change, the PCA will make sure that we inform our membership of what that change actually transpires into being. But I'll turn it over to Glenn for the Southern State update.
Thanks, Josh. And this is going to be a lot easier than the one we just did for the Northeast, where in a dozen states, there are issues in every single one of them. But because Greg Free's on this call, they're all scared of the South and they're not going to, never mind. How's it going, buddy? What I'm going to do is to start this is give a state by state crystal ball of the anticipated issues in the South, and then go into a collection of strategies and organizational matters to address those types of issues and the way that the retail community can best interact and organize politically to address the issues in your respective state. So with that, we'll start with Virginia, where once again, we anticipate a tax cap proposal being introduced. There is a diligent attempt with the existing administration, and there's going to be a new administration after January the 8th in Richmond. So once again, the retailers, the Cigar Association of Virginia, intends to pursue a tax cap in the Commonwealth. No anticipated issues in West Virginia, but it is interesting to note in West Virginia at the local level, there's been a successful string of proposals, and I just was able to endorse one with the mayor of Clarksburg, West Virginia, in the last week to 2 weeks, where I will draw some national correlations to this, trying to dramatize some examples of how this stuff works. I was just talking about, in Massachusetts, local boards of health can unilaterally pass nicotine-free generation proposals unilaterally to any local government. They can supersede any city council or local elected officials in enacting these. The same is true in West Virginia. The Board of Health has a superior level of authority over the elected officials. And there's been about 3. This one's proposed, but there's been 2 and now a third proposal in West Virginia to allow for cigar bars, cigar lounges in local governments. That's a positive trend in the state of West Virginia. North Carolina, we anticipate in this session legislation in a regulatory reform bill that would prevent local governments from enacting any tax or regulatory power stronger than that of the state. That is modeled after a statute that was passed and signed by the governor in South Carolina, where we don't anticipate any issues in South Carolina. No anticipated issues in Tennessee, Alabama, or Mississippi. I say Mississippi with an asterisk beside it because there's always proposals to raise taxes and enact a statewide smoking ban, and they have failed for at least the last generation. There may also be a measure for an interest in tax cap legislation in the state of Mississippi as well. In Florida, whereas we don't anticipate any issues, you still have this pesky state senator in Sarasota who has a problem with exemptions for smoking regulations. And even though it got caught up into the cannabis debate this past year, where he promised that if the cannabis referendum had passed the state of Florida, he was going to introduce a measure to close all the smoking exemptions existing in the state of Florida. It is a threat. It is a reason that we have been working with friends like Frank Herrera, that I think was originally on this call, may still be, on forming a state association. We've got some good folks that have stepped up to constitute a founding board for a Florida association, just in case we need it if this smoking issue raises its head again. In the Commonwealth of Kentucky, we fully anticipate, and we had discussions with the patron of this bill, to allow a statewide statute to allow for cigar bars in Kentucky. This bill got through the Kentucky House this past session, and it simply ran out of time, and they had to adjourn. So it wasn't for a lack of passion for the bill or support for the bill. It was just a timing and calendar question. And the patron fully anticipates reintroducing the cigar bar bill in Kentucky in January. Arkansas, one of my visual aids, they passed this bill on licensing and permitting in this last year. It is painfully obvious that the target is vape and e-cigarettes, but tobacco products as a whole kind of got swept up into the language. And there's been discussions about narrowing that language so that cigars are not affected by this licensing and permitting bill in the state of Arkansas. Louisiana, there's no anticipated issues, but I bring them up in this context. The tax cap, the 50-cent tax cap that was passed in Louisiana this year and signed by the governor, was a welcome change to the historical introduction of that legislation. Again, passed the House, passed the Senate, signed by the governor shortly after the trade show was in New Orleans. But that cap legislation has a 2-year sunset on it, which is not a long period of time. And there was a somewhat negative fiscal impact report on that. We're hoping that our tax cap study that Josh mentioned counters that fiscal analysis and will attest to the benefits of the cap and what it means to the state. So we'll be working with our legislative champions on the cap bill to make sure that message gets across, because the study will be released just before the Louisiana session convenes again. And I want to spend a moment just talking about Texas as an update, because as Josh mentioned, this is going to be recorded. Yet we've had some discussions, and you may have seen some things in the cigar media about Texas regarding this prohibition on using cartoons, celebrities, and references to food in the promotion of tobacco products. Once again, show and tell. This is a press release sponsoring Senator Molly Cook, who patroned this legislation, and it was enacted without the signature of the governor. Like a lot of states, if a governor doesn't act on a bill that's passed by the House and the Senate, if he doesn't act within a given period of time, usually about 10 days, the bill is enacted. And that was the case for Senate Bill 1313 in the state of Texas. Well, this gave a level of trepidation to the retailers in Texas because there's obviously people like Guy Fieri, who's associated directly with a cigar brand, and he is a celebrity. So the question came up, well, how does this affect things like Cigar Aficionado? Well, I'm pleased to report yesterday I had a very, very engaging, productive discussion with Senator Cook's chief of staff and legislative director in her Texas Senate office. it is painfully obvious their intent was vape and e-cigarettes. And like a lot of legislation of this nature, we get swept up into it. They were completely empathetic with the predicament that the bill may have put us in. We've since, through that discussion, found out that the enforcement side of this is through the Office of the Texas Comptroller through their Tobacco Enforcement Division. Again, since this is recorded, we're going to spread this message throughout the state of Texas, is that this is going to be strictly based upon a reporting type of enforcement. There's not going to be anybody going into cigar shops, seeing a picture of Pierce Brosnan on a Cigar Aficionado cover and go, you're violating this state statute. It's not going to work like that. It's going to be strictly on a reporting basis, uh, on given violations of that intent. So what did I do? Thanks to Scott Regina reminding me, Matthew McConaughey is a Texas boy. And we held up this copy of Cigar Aficionado with McConaughey with a cigar saying, he's a celebrity and is passionate about cigars. And it would seem that it would violate the spirit of this legislation. The important part here is how these types of ideas and concepts and legislation spread. Um, so the Texas legislature only meets every other year. So we'll be looking at a legislative fix in 2027 and having discussions with the Texas Comptroller's Office on the enforcement side just to get our point across. And regarding the connotation to food, for example, we brought up, well, Senator, what if red meat lovers is, equated with being marketing tobacco products? Well, after we talked about the demographic for the premium cigar sector really being those between the ages of 35 and 65, they get it. They get it. So we'll be looking to clean up that language and put this issue to rest in the coming days and months, working with both the senator's office and the comptroller's office. Now I want to chat a little. Oh, and Georgia. Georgia's legislature initiated a study on the impact of smoking in the state of Georgia. I have listened to approximately 8 hours of legislative testimony of the interim study committee on the impact of smoking in the state of Georgia. And once again, it's all about vape and e-cigarettes. But when they're talking about tax bills, it would be all too easy to have us swept up into that type of legislation on OTP taxes in the state of Georgia, which is already the highest in the South. So with that, we're going to be working with legislative allies to closely monitor that. There's a great deal of interest in tax cap legislation in the state of Georgia. We're going to have to keep an eye out on tax increase legislation because even though it's a Republican controlled legislature, it's our understanding that the Speaker of the House and some others in the conservative wings of their respective chambers are looking at taxes, tobacco taxes, to close their Medicaid mandate and health policy price tags. So Georgia is going to be one southern state we definitively got to keep an eye out on come January. Now I want to go through a list of strategies and organizational matters that work in tandem with addressing the legislative process. The first is the state association. We're fortunate in the South that we've got active associations in Virginia, North Carolina, uh, soon to be Florida, soon to be Tennessee, and a level of activity with the association in Louisiana and Texas. Everybody's going to have to up their game, though, when these fiscal impacts of Medicaid mandates come down to the states in January. The state association is also a conduit to what's going on at the local level and also to serve as a conduit to your federal congressional delegation. So having our national network of state associations is critical to our network success. Secondly, legislator outreach. It is critical, whether you're a manufacturer like Greg and Gabby or a retailer like Scott and the rest of you on this call, that you have a one-on-one personal relationship with your state legislators. They should know you on a first name basis, whether they agree with you or not on our issues. Same holds true for city halls and county governments, and the same holds true with your federal congressional delegation. We want you to write them. We want you to call them. We want you to introduce yourself. We want you to schedule a meeting in their district offices, whether it's the city hall, state legislator, or their member of Congress. Everybody in America lives within 60 miles of a congressional district office. Go visit with them. Highlight the issues that are important to our industry. Make sure they know that when you call, you mean that you're looking out for the livelihood of your respective business, whether you're a manufacturer or a retailer or a consumer. And that is absolutely critical. I've given numerous case studies where I've called retailers and they say, I don't know who he is or she is. And I'm like, that's the worst thing I could ever hear from anybody during advocacy season. They need to know who you are, they need to know what you represent. Thirdly, know your issues, whether it's tax cap, fighting tax increases, fighting smoking bans, advocating for cigar bar legislation. Know your issues. Invite your elected officials to your shop. Conduct a cigar town hall. Let them see your business. Let them see the customers that you attract. Let them see firsthand how your small business operates and that we're not the demonized beast that our opposition makes us out to be. Because believe me, I've seen the playbook by heart, lung, and cancer, and it's about this thick. And it clearly says no exemptions for premium cigars. And now that we've been successful across the country with cigar bar exemptions, they've come out with a special section just for us on that, on why the legislature should not exempt cigar bars and cigar lounges from Clean Indoor Air Act type of statutes. So making sure you know the issues and they see what your small business represents is absolutely critical. Use cigaraction.org. This is our conduit to the patrons of your shops. This is how we notify you in real time of the status of legislation that's filed between now and January through the spring of 26. We encourage you to put the cigaraction.org link on your respective sites and encourage your customers to sign up for it so that when we activate these grassroots alerts, we get some critical mass input to these legislative offices. Have a Capitol Hill day. And this has been a successful strategy with our friends in Maryland and Virginia and New York and other spots across the country where the retailers pick a single day and they go to the Capitol. They meet with each of their respective legislators' offices. They meet with the offices of leadership of their House and the Senate to highlight the issues that are important to our sector. And it's important to do this even if there are no issues. I've seen special interest groups across the country that have Capitol Hill days, even though there's not a single issue on the docket for them, just to make their presence felt. Coalition building cannot be underestimated. Building alliances with pro small business groups in your state and community can help deliver a message to show a level of independence from the way tobacco gets swept up into these legislative fights. And as Josh mentioned, soon within the next 30 to 45 days, we'll be releasing a national tax cap study. We're hoping that this demonstrates the fiscal and economic benefits of tax caps. I was just on our previous call with the Northeastern states, and I'm encouraging localities and retailers and the like to start using the terminology tax reform instead of tax cap, because it's politically and semantically, it comes across better and less threatening to the state treasury. Hopefully this cap measure, for example, the preliminary results that we've shared with our friends in New York and Illinois clearly demonstrate the amount of revenue bleed to surrounding states that are less expensive to buy cigars than in-state given new levels of taxation. Or it also demonstrates the fiscal impact, the positive fiscal impact of tax caps that allows customers to buy less expensively in your respective state. This has been an important demonstration to staff of not only legislators, but the staff of finance and Senate appropriations and House appropriations committees across the country. And we think this study is going to be a monumental testament to taking this policy approach that's already proven to be effective in 15 states. We're using case studies like Michigan across the country where they enacted a cap but put a 5 year sunset on it. At the end of the 5 years, there was a brilliantly
Mhm.
executed legislative committee hearing on that specific subject. Retailers lined up to give testimony on the impact that it had on their businesses, and they removed the sunset and made
Mhm.
it permanent, made the cap permanent. Having that type of case study helps demonstrate nationally that tax caps have become a quote unquote normal, acceptable approach to our tobacco tax policy. And we intend to have a full court press on that after this study is released. So, with that, I'll clam up
Mhm.
and be glad to take any questions the group might have or other issues Josh might want to bring up.